Okay, today we're going to do the second part of the Montessori Stem lesson. We're going to talk about how waters move through the stem. We're going to talk about varieties of stems. And then we're going to talk about follow-ups to our lessons. So we know that the stem has the task of carrying the water all the way up to the leaves from the ground. Have you ever thought about the tallest tree in the world? Think about the redwood tree in California. It's about 300 feet tall. The leaf on the very tip top needs water in order to make food. Imagine getting the water up that high. Here's how it works. The cells of the roots start to collect water, and they are built in such a way that the water can't go back. It can only move in one direction. Those thirsty cells take in the water, and they take in more water, and then they cannot hold any more water. So what do? They push the water up to the next cell. And that cell takes in more water until it cannot hold anymore. And it pushes the water up to the next cell. And it keeps going like this, all the way up. We call that root pressure. But you know, root pressure is not enough to get the water all the way up to the stem. Remember how the leaves give off water? The cells of the leaf, when they get too full, they give off water. And then what happens? They are thirsty and they need more water. So what do? They turn to the cell below them and they say, hey, give me some water. So what do? They turn to the cell below them and they say, hey, give me some water. And then they take that water in this way and they pull the water up. We call that evaporation, remember? So between those two things, root pressure and evaporation, they carry the water all the way up to the very tip top leaf. And in that way, the stem actually works like a pump. And here we can see that on our chart. We see how our roots are taking in the water and they go up through the stem. And here we have our pump, and it's pumping the water out to each of the leaves. So the water goes up from the roots all the way to the leaves. And we have another way to show this. So in the stem lesson part 1, we talked about this experiment, right? We had our red water, which you can do with celery. Well, there's something else that you can do with this red water that kind of shows how the stem works. And what I did is I just took a regular white napkin and I'm just going to put the tip in the water. And you can see the napkin is getting more and more red. The line is getting taller and taller. See? So just have it in the very tip and the water is going up, and that's just how our stem works. Okay, so now our next part is we're going to talk about the varieties of stems. Okay, so we have been talking about stems that look like this. Okay, those are erect stems. Okay, the stems that are standing straight up that go in the air are erect stems. And we are going to be talking about underground stems. Sometimes animals are very clever and they manage to eat through the stems, or sometimes the weather is so bad that life is not pleasant for stems. So some stems have decided to go underground where life is a little bit better and they can be protected. And we call those underground stems. Okay, now the plant is very clever and not all underground stems are alike. Here is an underground stem. It's an onion, right? Now this underground stem has taken the job of storing the food. It's very fleshy and it protects our stem, right, with all of these succulent leaves. This kind of underground stem is called a bulb. Onions, hyacinths, tulips, and narcissus are all bulbs. Now we have another kind of underground stem, and it looks like this. Garlic. Okay. Garlic has those same kind of leaves, but they're not succulent and juicy, they're dry. And we call this kind of underground stem a corm. Garlic, crocuses, gladiolas are all corms, C-O-R-M, corm. Now we have another kind of underground stem that grows right underground. It grows horizontally. We call this a rhizome. This is ginger. So some stems are erect, right? This one grows and they grow vertically. This stem grows horizontally, right under the ground. Iris, lily of the valley, begonias, and gingers are all rhizomes. Excuse kind of underground stem. It stores lots of good food for the plant, and it's called a tuber. Examples of these are white potatoes, ranunculus, and anemones. Now, we have some stems that are so lazy that they grow right on the ground, and those are called procumbent stems. An example may be strawberry plant, but this plant we pulled out from our garden. It was dead, but we pulled it. So here are the little tiny little roots, but here is the stem. It grows right along the ground. Okay. There is another kind of lazy stem that doesn't want to do its own standing or growing up tall. They just hang into other things. We call these climbing stems. There's lots of different kinds of climbing stems. A hook climber is a kind of stem that is lazy and it hooks onto other things to climb up to other things. So this is a rose, a climbing rose, and it has hooks, right, to climb onto the bricks to pull up the plant. Another kind of plant, as it grows up, it throws out tendrils to catch onto something else. So here, see all these little loops? Those are called tendrils. And it grows on something else to support it. We have a chart that shows us another example of this. Right, so here is our hook climber. And here we are showing something growing, right? Climbing, hanging onto something else. And here, on this chart, we can see the tendrils. See the little curly cues of tendrils. Okay, so climbing stems are honeysuckles and hops. Hook climbers are blackberries and roses. And tendrils are grapes and passion flowers. Now for follow-up, we want the children to explore all the varieties of nature. We want to make collections, especially when it comes to the types of woods. Right? Examine the tree rings and the trees that have been cut down or fallen down. And you can analyze the life of the tree by its rings. You can tell how old the tree is, and you can determine whether there was a lot of rain. Rings that are further apart show lots of rain. And on dry years, the rings are closer together. You can look at other things of the tree. You can look at the knots and determine their cause. You can look and see if you can find the different kinds of stems that we were talking about today. Look in your refrigerator. See if there's any stems that you like to eat.